Well, first of all, welcome everybody. I know it's hard to now pace up again after this lunch, but I'm promising you it's going to be very interesting for you. So first of all, I want to talk about shared mobility, of course. It's not the major topic when it comes to Energy Summit, but how we reinvented it at Trupy will definitely make sense for you guys. So today, I'm going to present you what is Trupy. So Trupy, basically, we are a shared mobility operator based in Paris. We operate with the Japanese brand Yamaha, and we are the only one in the world to partner with a major OEM to deploy our solution everywhere in Europe. So why is it so important for us to present you today shared mobility and major operator? Is because we still believe there is a huge market to be taken. So as I mentioned here, 3.2 billion is the market that is to be seized today. But on top of that, electrification is a correlated market that needs to be taken into account by shared mobility operator. Short snapshot in the past when it comes to mobility. 2015, that's really where we saw shared mobility surging in Europe. With what we call today pure players, it means somebody would go in China, partner with somebody who's producing e-bikes, mopeds, kick scooter, and they will basically flood the streets with those type of prototypes. Today, the market is consolidating, and we do believe that OEM have the bigger part to play now. So that's what we do at Trupy with Yamaha. We have basically two types of mopeds, a 50cc equivalent, what you see in every major cities today in Europe and in the world, Berlin, Paris, Milan, Barcelona, but also a 125cc. Why am I explaining you that? Because that's part of our commitment to provide something that is greener today. So why Trupy and why it's going to be a success story? Trupy, we are born from the largest dealership network in France, which is called Groupe Chapa. It's a 100 million euro revenue dealership network that basically one day they decided to compete against those pure players, but with one belief, that quality comes through OEM, and tomorrow if you really want to provide green mobility, we have to do it through an OEM. So that's what we do today. And why is it important when it comes to charging station? I will talk about that later on. Because we want to provide this mobility not only in major cities like Warsaw can be, like Berlin, like Barcelona, like London, but also in smaller and medium-sized cities. But how can you do that if you are a pure player? I just bring it bluntly. Basically, you are a pure player. It costs you a lot to enter Paris, enter Berlin. It's going to cost you a lot to enter a medium-sized city. So basically, it renders it impossible. It means, for me, there is a market to be taken. But how do we do that? Of course, we can linger on the dealership networks, such a big brand as Yamaha has. And why that? Because they have around 2,000 dealerships in Europe. First of all, back on the flagship cities. So how we construct the business model today as a non-pure player, basically we focus on flagship cities. And to be realistic about shared mobility, there are only few flagship cities. It means it's a city that is dense enough and has enough inhabitants and users where you can put yourself, your money, to develop your whole business model there. And I mean about Paris, I'm meaning about Milan, Berlin, Barcelona, but you cannot go into smaller size cities like Salzburg, Munich, Strasbourg. That's impossible because it's too less cost effective. So here you have the example of Paris, and just to give you an example in terms of scalability and size, just for mopeds, if you want to be profitable in Paris, you need to have at least 2,000 mopeds per operator, which is a lot, to be honest, because the cost of the fleet is around 8 to 10 million euros. So that's the forefront cost you have to assume before even you start your business. And that's obviously something you cannot commit to when you go to a smaller size city. So how do we do that, basically? Because I'm here talking about flagship city. Yeah, okay, concretely, you have 5 to 10 cities in Europe, 100 in the world that you can match. But how do you do that? How can you be actually inclusive to smaller size city and medium size city? As I mentioned before, we do this franchise model. And it'll come to the point where I explain you charging posts. Because franchise model is basically you knock at the door of a smaller city through the dealership and you just say to the dealer, okay, let's share the costs and I'll move forward with your small size city. And you all come from every country in Europe, So it can be Vilnius, it can be Nantes in France, it can be Sevilla, because they have dealerships. Those dealers, they have their own network and they know the ground, which is super important, because everybody thinks that mobility is a global market, but that's actually false. Mobility is a very, very local market. So it means you need to know the legislation, the authorities, you need to know the users, and the specificities of your own city. If I take cities in the west of France, there is a huge seasonality when it comes to summer because all the Parisians, they go there. If I take the east, then you have a strong winter. So how do you manage with all of that if you just think that everything is global? So bringing everybody at the same point, that was our idea with the franchise model. We share the cost, we help them to operate, and that helps us entering new cities with basically a local force. And that's what we can do with 2,000 dealerships in Europe, with around 300 only in France. And to achieve so, we can do that already by opening 10 dealerships by the end of 2023 in France, with cities like, for those who know France, Montpellier, Lille, Strasbourg. So quite strong cities, but something we cannot achieve on our own because it's way, way, way too costly. But how do we think about all this ecosystem? Because mobility is global, but it's also an ecosystem. And I was discussing with with the panelists you will see afterwards about the quality of the electricity you need to have if you charge a battery, because it's really good if you want to be green and you just say, oh, we provide green mobility. 2 thumbs up, but what happens if you don't know where the electricity comes from? If it comes from a nice coal factory, then you've lost everything. So that's why we thought about this TrueP energy solution. It means we provide with a nice charging station network, but we also make sure where the electricity comes from. And on top of that, we emphasize on the second life solution, which means we make sure that the whole life cycle of the mopeds we are providing, it's managed. It's 12 years. It's not 4 or 5 years, what you can see with those pure player mopeds, or 6 to 8 months with the kick scooter that we all discussed a lot already. Now, focus on what I want to present you today. It's a side project we are leading inside TrueP, so we are a shared mobility operator. But on top of that, what we thought is, how can we create a mobility hub inside those small and medium-sized cities? And that's actually quite easy. I will jump back to the next slide, which is a charging post, but a modular one. And I take the example of a city I know well because I'm from there, it's Strasbourg, east of France. It's a large and dense city, but inside the city, the mayor, they don't want to have shared mobility. But it still means that there are plenty of people that need to travel every day. So that's really good for shared mobility, for mopeds, for cargo bikes, for e-bikes. But how can you basically sell that to all the mayors of the small villages around and say, okay, guys, you are so far excluded from shared mobility and from charging points? We all know here around, because it's the Energy Summit, that charging post, the development is way too slow for what actually the market needs, right? I think we all agree on that. The idea we had, and we are developing with Polytechnic School in France, is to put a modular station. It means it's 2 massive batteries in a container that you put somewhere on the parking in a village, and you just say, okay, that's my mobility point. So here I can charge very fast 4-wheelers, but also 2-wheelers. And why is it important for us? Because first of all, you reach untapped zone. And as you might now understand, our goal at TrueP is, yes, to serve everybody and as maximum as users, but also to be the most inclusive possible. And how can you be inclusive? Because you also tackle the untapped zone. You just don't always go to the highways or to the city center where everybody competes to be there, but also the untapped zone. Why? Because there is still density. It means there is still a market. And if you share the cost, then there is profitability. And of course, it's important for the mayors, but for also the company, that you have an increased traction. Because if you provide mobility, that's good, but you still need to educate. But if you provide on top a charging point where everybody that has electric vehicles needs to charge their car or their scooter or their truck, then you have an increased traction. Of course, it's easy to use because you have all the plugs possible, because that's now a standard. And the idea behind is not that you do the full charge of your car, of your 2-wheeler. You just get the nice 100K that helps you then to go back home, because one of the major constraints of charging point, especially the fast charging one, is that you never charge your car fully. You just need this nice 100 kilometers that allows you to go home where you can charge, usually on lower voltage. So it's a plug-and-play approach, and we are working with a German company and a French company to develop the post, the batteries, and also the whole ecosystem around, because you have a nice interface which allow any type of user to have the pricing online, the scheduling, the booking. Of course, it's flexible because you can, as I mentioned, charge a scooter, but also a car. And it's sustainable. And what I mean sustainable, yes, it's about electricity, but we also know where the electricity comes from. And I will insist on that because traceability and the ability to know where exactly the electricity comes from, that's something we also sell to the cities. And why do we do that? Because there are engagements, especially in France and tomorrow in Europe, that the cities, they will have to take. It means I need to provide to my inhabitants and also to my crew, if I'm a mayor, a certain amount of electric vehicle. I need to provide them charging points and also the traceability of the electricity. So, as I mentioned, we have partnerships. Why is it important? Because the technology already exists, right? The technology is available on the market, but nobody basically thought about, okay, how can I package that? And how can I turn that into a business? And for us, it's super mandatory because the business behind is, how can I sell more and more shared mobility? I can sell that with a simple charging post because you create the whole ecosystem around, and tomorrow when those small villages, they will get more and more electric vehicle because that's gonna happen, then they already have the charging post. And why the modularity is important? For two reasons. The first one is, if you make a mistake on the location, then you just have to change it. And that's really, really convenient because most of the charging stations today, we basically duplicate what has been done with fuel station, which sometimes is wrong because we put randomly fuel station and we just thought, okay, that's gonna work out. But for charging station, it's a bit different. So there is a lot of data analysis behind that. So that's the easiness and of use of those charging posts. And the second part is, of course, the charging posts provide fast charging station, but you just have to plug it on low voltage, and it charges the whole day, and it provides you around 100 to 50 charging shots per day, which is super convenient. And on the left side of my slides, of course, there is the partnership with Vulog, which is one of the leading operators in mobility in the world. It means you mix both worlds, charging on one side, mobility on the other side. It means we already know the codes, people that are using shared mobility, car sharing. We know the codes of the interface, the type of language we need to speak with them, the pricing model, the scheduling, the booking, as I mentioned before. So it means all those features, they already exist, and we just have to bring them into those small villages, those commercial areas, those points of interest. So just to show you how advanced we are, and on the left side, it's just thanks to Midjourney, for instance. You just type that in Midjourney, and you see already how can you make those ugly charging posts fit into the landscape. The idea we have is to launch this first POC in Strasbourg. And as you see here, it's a massive commercial zone, which is around 6 to 7 kilometers long. And here, there is nothing. There are only 4 low-voltage charging posts. So it means there is an opportunity. It's one of the biggest commercial areas in Europe. It's around 200,000 people that travel in here every day. And those people, they don't want to have their full charge. No, they just want to have those nice few kilometers they need to finish their round as an entrepreneur or to just travel from one side to the other. And that's something we will launch by the end of 2023. And thanks to that, we already reached an agreement to put around this charging post 100 mopeds, allowing people to travel inside the commercial zone, but also traveling to the small villages around that are actually really wealthy, but they are lacking of solution because they are excluded from those mobility points. So all of that to tell you today that at Trupi, yes, we are an ambitious mobility player willing to become one of the European leaders by 2025, thanks to Yamaha, our brand, but also we are investigating all those options we have today to make mobility more inclusive and greener. Thanks for your attention, and feel free to ask me any question.